Hi, everybody. And I think now I'm here. And anyone who knows me knows that technology is not quite my forte. And I don't mean to be speaking that into the universe, but it just is what it is. Fortunately, Kathy was able to walk me through this. And so I was only 5 minutes. We were actually here on time, but I couldn't seem to get on Facebook Live. The good news is I think I have it now, kind of. So welcome, everyone. And I am going to do... I'm also going to try to multitask here, if I may. And I usually don't even try, but I'm looking at the people who are coming on, and so if you see me looking away from the camera, that's why. I see my great friends Jeff and Maria, Kathleen, Steve, Shannon, awesome Stephanie. Hi, Ivan. Hi. Okay, so this is great. This is the first episode, an auspicious start, if you will, but the first first episode of the Go-Giver Influencers. And each week, right around this time, we'll cover some topic of having to do with influence, connecting it with the Go-Giver way. We usually have a guest, but not always. But what I'd really like this to be is more of a conversation. So while I might start out in the first couple of minutes with a certain thought, we really want to have questions and comments and keep a conversation going. And let's see how this goes. So I'm going to look every so often and see if I catch a question. And Kathy, if she catches a question, might just Skype me to let me know. So we'll see how I do with this. So let's begin with influence, and we're going to sort of focus today on what I call the logic of emotions. And many of you have heard me say that influence, if we're going to define it on a very basic level, is the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. And while that's the definition, it's not really the substance or the essence of influence. The essence is pull. It's gentle pull as opposed to push. We know that trying to push a rope is usually counterproductive. When we pull a rope, we can lead, we can influence, and we need to do it gently, and we need to do it in a way that is ultimately to benefit the other person as well as ourselves. As such, we understand that any kind of influence, whether we're talking about sales relationships or personal relationships, is always about asking the right questions that allow us to understand what the other person needs, wants, desires. And so everything about influence, great influence is never about the influencer, right? Just as great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. It's always about the other person. It's about bringing value to everyone whose lives we touch, to everyone whose lives we want to bring value to. And so it's about the other person, but it begins with us. And which is why the first law of genuine influence is to master your emotions. The sages of old asked a question, who is mighty? And they answered, that person who is strong enough to control their own emotions and make of an enemy or of a potential enemy a friend. And that's really where it all begins, because it's only when we're in control of ourselves and control of our emotions that we're even able to be in a position to take a potentially negative person or situation and turn it into a win for everyone involved. We know this. I mean, how many sayings talk about that person who can do this? In fact, I quote in one of my other books, Adversaries into Allies, I quote the great Orison Swett Marden. He's one of my favorite authors ever. He wrote a wonderful book called Peace, Power, and Plenty. It was written in 1909. What a wonderful book. And here's what he writes. Self-control, again, the ability to master our emotions, self-control is the very essence of character. To be able to look a person straight in the eye, calmly and deliberately, without the slightest ruffle of temper, under extreme provocation, gives a sense of power which nothing else can give. To feel that you are always, not sometimes, always master of yourself gives a dignity and strength to character. It buttresses it. It supports it on every side as nothing else can. This is the culmination of thought mastery. That's the person who can master their emotions. And it's easy to see why that person who can master their emotions, who can control their emotions, is so respected by others. They have influence. They have the ability to move others to a desired action. Okay, I'm going to go back and try to look at some of these, see if there's questions and so forth. I see one from Haleli, and I will do my best to get to that. Now, when we talk about controlling our emotions, and so often we don't, and we don't because we're human beings. And even though we know we should, we don't. Because we are emotional creatures. We are built that way. We'd like to think we're logical, and to a certain extent we are, but we're pretty emotion-based. We make major decisions based on emotion, and we back up those emotional decisions with logic. We rationalize, which if you break up the word rationalize, it simply means we tell ourselves rational lies. And we do this to justify that decision that we know we really shouldn't have made, even though we wanted to, because there was some instant gratification, right? Or maybe we're justifying the fact that we let someone emotionally push our buttons and we caused ourselves to feel frustrated or helpless or angry, right? And so we want to justify that because it's easier than blaming ourselves. So we'll give ourselves all kinds of rationalizations. But the key is to understand that we're not saying you should lose your emotions or forego your emotions or deny your emotions. Emotions are part of us, and to deny our emotions actually would not be logical. And it's also not necessary, because emotions are a very important part of life. Emotions are a wonderful part of life. They bring us joy. They make life worthwhile. So it's not that we need to in any way deny our emotions. We just need to master our emotions. In other words, having our emotions work for us as opposed to we working for our emotions, or would it be us working for our emotions? I think I love what my great friend, the leadership authority, and one of my treasured mentors, Dondi Scumaci, says about this. Dondi says, by all means, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car, right? By all means, take your emotions along with you, but they need to be in the passenger side, seatbelt fastened securely, while you're on the driver's side. Another way we can look at this is, and in John David Mann's and my newest book, The Go-Giver Influencer, one of the characters, there were two mentors in this story and two proteges. And one of them, she is a judge, and she has a mentor a protege rather, by the name of Jackson. The judge is the mentor. And she says, Jackson, think of yourself as a company. You are a company, okay? You don't have a company, you are a company. And you have a board of directors. That board of directors is your emotions. Now, you also have a CEO. That CEO is your logic. That's the logical part of you. Now, by all means, the CEO should counsel their board. They should take advice. They should listen to their board of directors. Absolutely. But the decision needs to be made by the CEO. And in that same way, we should certainly take counsel of our emotions. We should listen to our emotions. We should pay attention to our emotions. Our emotions give us good clues, good signals, but the final decision needs to be our logic. And the more we act out of logic, the more we speak out of logic, the better our decisions are going to be made. And as we learned on a recent podcast, I interviewed Anne, oh, what is her last name? I'm so sorry. And I'm not thinking of it right now. If someone remembers, would you put it in she's the poker champion. And we did this on thinking in bets. As she said, just because you make the right decisions doesn't mean you're going to get the right result, the best results, because there's a certain amount that's chance. It just is. But the better And the more you consistently make the right decisions, which is always the result of leading with logic, listening to your emotions, but leading with logic, that's the degree that you are going to make the best decisions consistently, and the chances are great you're going to get the desired results. Yeah, it was Annie, and I am just not, Annie Duke. That's right, Annie Duke. And the book is Thinking in Bets, and Kathy just put the URL to the, oh, sorry, my phone is going. And Kathy just put the URL to the episode. By the way, I so highly recommend Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets. My goodness, what a wonderful way of thinking she shows us how to do. It's really fantastic, and it can help you really distinguish between whether you're making an emotional decision or whether you're making a decision based on logic. Bobby Gavanis writes, emotional decisions cause me so much trouble. Absolutely. So, same here. We've all been there. I want that Oreo cookie. I want that no, I don't want an Oreo cookie. I want that entire package of Oreos, especially the double stuffed Oreos. Okay. And I might know that I shouldn't do it because it's going to put 5 pounds on me. It's going to make me feel lousy and so forth. But in the moment you start emotionally rationalizing why it's okay to have them. Now, that's why what I do is I don't keep Oreos in the house, because I'm worried about those emotions taking over. We are emotional creatures. And even when we know this, sometimes we're still not able to show that self-control, and we lose to our emotional desires rather than our logical mind. Which doesn't mean, by the way, that that's an excuse. It's not an excuse. It's still, we're responsible. But we also know enough that if we're not strong enough, it's the same thing with working out. Why I have a trainer that comes over 6 days a week, 6 mornings a week, right at 6:30, and also prepares all my healthy meals for the day, because we want to create the environment where our emotions are not able to overrun our logic. Let me go to a couple questions here. I'm going to kind of try to go from the beginning. And actually, there was one, before I get to the question on here, there was a wonderful question that was sent in. And the question was, can you share with us several tips for creating positive influence in a toxic workplace? Again, influence, moving people to a desired and appropriate action. And yet he's talking about having a toxic workplace. So now, based on the information I have, I don't really know exactly what he means by toxic workplace. And this is something that we also talk about when we talk about influence, and that is making sure you can ask questions in order to really get the information. So if I was speaking with him about this, I would be asking him questions, what he means by a toxic workplace, and what ways this and that, and we'd really narrow it down so that we can provide an answer within a very specific framework. But that's okay. Let's go with this, because many of us have worked at places where there are toxic relationships. So I'm sure we can take what will be kind of a general response from me and gear it to your workplace. By the way, as I'm talking about this, please feel free to write your own suggestions as well, because I'm sure there's many great ideas we can get from sharing these suggestions. So again, the question, can you share with us several tips for creating positive influence in a toxic workplace? Well, the first thing would be understanding that you can influence from anywhere in your company, regardless of your position. Great books by my friends and colleagues, Robin Sharma and Mark Sanborn, have talked about leading from anywhere, right? And you can lead, you can influence from anywhere by your example, by the things you say, by the things you do, by who you are. However, a culture of leadership, a culture starts at the top and trickles down. Okay, so for a certain culture to take over, you've got to get the buy-in at the top. Only when this person at the top buys into your vision and buys into your idea of what a non-toxic, what a healthy, functional workplace would be, buys into it and is equipped to lead that way, will the workplace actually move from toxic to healthy. So what are some of the things, though? And again, this is kind of generic just because I don't know about that particular workplace. The first I would say is whenever, just in my experience, either working for them when I was younger or consulting for them, is whenever there's a toxic workplace, gossip tends to be a very big part of that workplace. People are gossiping, they're backbiting, they're talking about other people in negative ways. I define gossip as any kind of harmful or hurtful information that is not necessary to share. Now, sometimes there's harmful or hurtful information that is necessary to share, but even when you do that, there are certain ways that we should do it. Privately, if possible, only to the people who need to know this, and only to the point that that it helps Craig. Obviously, if someone's stealing from the company, you need to let the appropriate people know, if what have you. I mean, there's all sorts of it, but you know what I mean. So the unnecessary sharing of information. But I would, go so far as if I was turning an organization around and it had to come from the top, there would be an edict. And now, again, I don't usually like edicts, because what's an edict? It's compliance. It's saying you have to do this or that. And very rarely is that sustainable. Very rarely is it effective. However, in this case, it would be, and that is to have a no gossip policy. To have a no gossip policy. There is absolutely no gossip. It won't be tolerated. You're warned if it happens once, and lovingly dismissed if it happens again. From what I understand, Dave Ramsey actually has that policy at his company, and it works, and it's good. And I've known of others who do as well, and it works. But you've got to stay with it. You can't just say it and then not do it. Okay. So there should be only positive speak. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean, and please don't misunderstand this, because that would be my fault if you misunderstand this, because, well, it would be. That doesn't mean we don't call people on the carpet for things. That doesn't mean you don't correct. It doesn't mean you don't critique. It doesn't mean you don't constructively criticize, with tact and kindness, of course, but that doesn't mean problems are swept under the rug. Absolutely not. A great example of this is Ray Dalio's company, the Bridgewater Group, which has been one of the most, if not the most successful fund for years, forever. And he's a multi-billionaire, very successful guy, and they absolutely have a policy of calling people out when someone does something counterproductive, including calling out Ray Dalio. Talk about a guy who's been able to totally put his ego to the side, but it's always done constructively. But no, I would say for this, the company, get rid of gossip, and that's a fantastic start. I would also say to put into the culture that any issue that anyone has with anyone else, or about a methodology, is always brought into the light, never kept in the dark. Okay, so people are always dealing with truth. Now, again, truth does not mean nastiness. I'm always, when people brag about being brutally honest, right? I'm persuaded that they care much more about being brutal than they care about being honest. You can be honest and be tactful and kind about it. So I hope that helps with that question. But meanwhile, and I'll look forward to afterwards seeing some of the comments and suggestions for helping rid a toxic workplace and making it more better. So let's go to another question, because I really want these to be. And this is wonderful. I'm looking at everybody here in the comments, and just fantastic. Okay, so let's go to Haleli's question. What is your perspective on how to deal with thinking biases in yourself and in those you influence? Well, this is such a great question, because these biases, we're hearing the term more now, cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias. And they both show up so often, all the time, actually, as part of our lives. Now, so let's look at them. Cognitive dissonance simply means when what you think and what you feel, what you believe. That's the cognitive part, what you just know, right? Even if you don't really know it, it's what you know, what you believe. That's the cognitive part. When there is it's the word I'm looking for, that dissonance means, an incongruency, okay? There's an incongruency with what you just know and with some new information that's come up. Now, what happens, this cognitive dissonance, is that you just feel awful about it. You get a really bad feeling about this. Here's this thing that you know, you're sure about, whether it's about this politician or it's about this policy, or it's about this person who you have known and loved and trusted for years, okay? You just knew this to be true, and then you find out something about them, and it's proven to be true, and now you've got an issue. Because emotionally, you just want to believe this about what you already believe, but you really can't. Now, you can, and people do it, but it's totally emotional, and you get a really lousy feeling. That's cognitive dissonance. So what it does is it forces you to either be uncomfortable with your new thought or with your new information, or somehow just block it and put it out of your mind, which really isn't effective if you want to be the best you can be, or to change. It means you make a new decision about something based on new information. Most people won't do that. I hope we will. But this is also where confirmation bias comes in. And confirmation bias is exactly what it says. It's that when it's like you feel strongly about a certain way, you hold a bias, you hold a position about something, and any kind of information that comes to you that you hear or that you read or that you see, if it confirms what you already believe, your existing bias, you believe it. But if it doesn't, you dismiss it. Again, in my book, Adversaries into Allies, I quote the great Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional Intelligence. Listen to this, okay? As Daniel Goleman discussed in his classic Emotional Intelligence, the emotional mind takes its beliefs to be absolutely true, and so discounts any evidence to the contrary. That's confirmation bias, right? It confirms what you already believe, or you just dismiss it. That's why it's so hard to reason with someone who is emotionally upset. No matter the soundness of your argument from a rational or logical point of view, it carries no weight if it's out of keeping with the emotional conviction of the moment. So you can see how, that's very counterproductive. Now, here's the thing about confirmation bias. When we have it, and Scott Adams talks about this a lot in his blog and in his books, it's unconscious. We don't know we have it, and we will deny it. And I got to tell you, I was in a discussion with someone, a great friend of mine, and we were not agreeing on this particular point. And he said to me, he said, I think you're suffering from confirmation bias. And what was my first reaction? Not response. My first reaction was I wanted to say, that's not true at all. I don't have confirmation bias. But then my response mechanism took over, and I said to myself, well, actually, one of the things about having confirmation bias is that you're not aware that you have confirmation bias. Now, that doesn't mean you have it, but it doesn't mean you don't have it. So I said to him, I really can't tell you whether I'm suffering from confirmation bias now or not, because, of course, part of one of the characteristics of having confirmation bias is the person with confirmation bias doesn't realize that he or she has it. So we were able to work through the situation. It was fine. But it's knowing that if you find yourself in a situation where you're just refusing to accept some kind of new information, either cognitive dissonance or confirmation bias may be at work. Now, again, it may not be, but wisdom is going through the steps to question our own premises and asking ourselves why we feel that way. What are we basing this on? Who did we hear it from? Why do we believe them? Who did they hear it from, right? And going through all that. And that actually makes us much more influential, because we're willing to go to that length to make sure that we're adding to constructive dialogue rather than taking away from it. Okay, I'm looking to see some more. We started late. We started at 3:05 again, for those who came on late, not because I showed up late, but because Mr. Technology Wizard here messed up. So we're at Oh, and I'm not sure if I am still on or not. I may not be. Okay, well, I think I am, so I'm just going to keep going. Uh, but I lost the main picture. So, actually, could someone just let me know if we're on? Could you just write in the comment that we're still on? Okay, I think I'm back. I don't know if I was up. Can you let me know if you can see and hear me still? I think you may have lost me for a little bit. Okay, I'm back on. Jeff West writes, one of the greatest sales leaders, by the way, I've ever met. He was a state sales director with Aflac for many years. He built up an enormous. He was actually a client of mine. That's how we met. And he has a great book. Oh my gosh, the something. Jeff, put your thing in there. I'm thinking unintentional sales guy, but that's not what it is. But it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful parable. In fact, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind putting your link to your book in there in the comment section. What a great, great book. And let's see, Jeff. So Jeff said we should start a confirmation bias 12-step group. It's not a bad idea, because the more that we can get past that confirmation bias, the much more effective we're going to be, and the much more influential we're going to be. All right, let us move on. So really, when it comes right down to it, regarding emotions, when we can work within our own emotions and help other people to effectively work within theirs, that's when our influence really goes sky high. Now, how do you really begin to control your emotions? Well, you move from a mindset of react to respond. I remember when I first learned this from Zig Ziglar, and he talked about, reacting is when we're allowing outside circumstances to control us. Responding is when we remain in control of ourselves and our emotions and our decisions. Well, he put it this way: did you respond well to the medication, or did you have a bad reaction? And I love that. So how do we get ourselves into response mode? How was I able to, during that cognitive dissonance discussion, kind of, rather than reacting with what I wanted to go with, how did I end up responding with a much more productive answer? We retrain our brains. We retrain our brains, and it takes some work. It's not hard to do, but it takes some work. And the way I would suggest is this: if you know, and do it with one thing at a time, if you know that someone either at work or at home or anywhere, or whatever, says or does something that, again, kind of pushes your buttons and causes you to make yourself angry, run through in your mind a typical scenario and how you usually react to it, and that it doesn't feel good. Now I want you to run through that same scenario, because it will probably happen again, something like that. And I want you now to see yourself just handling it beautifully, just like Orison Swett Marden in that quote we went through, right? You're just totally unruffled. You're taking it in, and you're fine with it. You're going to have the perfect response, the thing to say, not a wise guyish thing to say, but it's a good, and we won't worry about the words right now. We'll get to that in future episodes, but you handle it beautifully, and this person, you just turn them right around, and it's fantastic. Now, I want you to feel how good that feels, and I want you to practice that. And I want you to practice doing that in much the same way that an astronaut before a mission in space would do hundreds of simulations, so that by the time they finally get into space, if it finally happens that they have this situation, they've already been there and done that hundreds of times. They know exactly what to do, so they can respond instead of react. And you might think, well, but being in space isn't the same as doing simulations. Responding well to someone who pushes your buttons isn't the same as imagining it. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough. We know that the subconscious cannot tell the difference. It cannot distinguish between that which has actually happened and that which has been suggested to it, especially again and again and again. So what I want you to do is practice this and practice how you feel. And then when it comes up, when it happens and this person says something that annoys you or makes you mad or whatever, you just handle it beautifully. And I want you to take pleasure in that afterwards and realize that if you can do it once, you can do it every time. However, we also have to understand we're human beings and we probably won't do it every time. We'll mess up sometimes because that's what we as humans do. But when you do that, don't feel too badly. And you can feel a little badly, but not too badly, because you have plenty of chances to practice. And what you'll see is in practically no time, I'm telling you very, very quickly, if you put your mind to this, you will move from that reactionary person to that person who responds, to that person who's in control of themselves, and you become better liked and more respected and highly trusted and far more influential in your world. Okay, and that's, you know, good to practice. In fact, we can practice that over the next week, and next Thursday let's discuss this and let's see how you did with that. So let me go once more to the comments. We're going to end in a couple of minutes. I don't want to keep you too long. I could talk with you guys all day, but don't want to keep you more than what we should. Paul Anderson, one of our certified Go-Giver speakers and just a great guy, a wonderful business builder. He came into a company once that was really a dysfunctional company, and boy, did he just turn it around. He's fantastic. Bob is a should thought linked to logic or emotion, and if we think of an I want thought, is that linked to logic or emotion? I guess it probably depends. Should is usually logic, right? We know we should do this. Right? We know we should. We don't want to, but we should. Although sometimes it is emotional because, well, I should do that, right? But logically, it isn't the right thing to do, or, you know, what have you. So I think it depends on the context. Great question, Paul. Great question. Let's see. Oh, there's Berta Medina. I love her. She's wonderful. Another one of our certified Go-Giver speakers and coaches. Let's see. Bob, you are going through cognitive dissonance, not knowing fully if you are on or not. Yeah, that's true. That's true, Al. I was. Okay, so I guess that's all the questions. What I'll do is I'll also come back to this later on, and I'll make sure I look and go through. I might not be able to answer every one on there just because there's a whole lot of people, and I appreciate it. But listen, for those of you who don't know, April 10th, John David Mann's and my new book, The Go-Giver Influencer, will be coming out. I think you can see it here. You can go to thegogiver.com and click on the purple book cover, and it will take you where you can get 2 free chapters. And if you'd like to pre-order, you can. You'll get some really cool gifts. Let's see. Unless there's anything else, we will see you back here, same bat time, same bat channel next Thursday. Tell everyone about this who you think might enjoy it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on the initial episode of the Go-Giver Influencers. I'm Bob Burg. Make it a great day and a great week.